Hi, and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier, President of Action for Life, and this is Father Michael Orsi. Hello, Father.
Hi.
Always good to see you.
Well, what do you have for me today?
I thought we would talk about removing God from our lives, which we seem to be doing more and more of. And let me just quote a couple of things, if I may. November 30th, 1951, the Board of Regents in New York approved a non-denominational prayer for morning procedures with kids in school.
Right.
And by the way, there was a provision that said a child could opt out if they chose not to do this. Simple 22-word prayer that goes like this: Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee and beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen.
Amen.
Fast forward to 1962, in a 6-1 decision at the Supreme Court, the court held that the government, that written prayers in public schools were unconstitutional because it violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
Then we go to 1980, case Stone versus Graham at the Supreme Court, where they struck down a Kentucky law that required a copy of the Ten Commandments be posted in every public school classroom. I don't get it.
Yeah. I don't get it either. Our country, first of all, was founded on biblical principles.
Sure.
And the founders recognized how important religion is for us to have a Republican form of government. We needed virtuous citizens, and how important the churches were, because the churches helped to instill virtue in our people. Now, even with our school system, relatively speaking, before the 19th century, schooling took place usually at home. But with Horace Mann up in Massachusetts said, we should move to have a system of public education. And the system of public education was also a good thing for the nation, because you need an educated citizenry too. And educated citizens can make good decisions. They're guided in their voting habits and in what's necessary for the good of the country. In those schools, up until, we're talking about 1950 with the New York State law, but really up until 62, at least the King James Version of the Bible was allowed in the schools and usually read in the schools. So it's not that the school system was atheistic all along. No, it's relatively new that God had a place in education. The Bible had a place in education. Now, with the removal of God from the schools, we have not only secularized education, but we are producing a citizenry that does not reflect on God, or sometimes believe in God, unless they're getting it from home and they're going to church. So that's something also that we have to talk about. What's going on? Are they going to church?
Right.
Okay. Are they having religion given to them at home by their parents? But let's take a look. In 1950, certainly that prayer that you read from New York State was innocuous. Innocuous prayer is very nice, pray for your teacher, pray for your parents. And I think something like that would have a very nice influence on children. Sometimes when you go to school, when I went to school, there were some teachers I didn't like. And it's a nice thing to be able to say, I have to pray for my teacher. My teacher, we used to call it in loco parentis. That means the teacher's there in place of the parent. And that meant certain respect and care. Same thing, praying for your parents. That's a wonderful thing to be able to say. I prayed for my parents today in school. My parents are responsible for me, and I'm grateful for all the good things that they do for me. I go home after school, and there's a cupcake waiting for me. In those days, 50s, mom usually was at home, and a cupcake was waiting, and a glass of milk. Okay, let's just say that. But it was a beautiful thing. And it set the whole tone for someone's life, a child's life. It provided for a certain worldview, if you will. That God is present in my life. I pray for these people in my life that God is using to help me to grow up. Even the Pledge of Allegiance, which in 1954, I think it was under President Eisenhower, put in, in the Constitution, under God.
Yeah.
Under God. And so you had
I think the Knights of Columbus were responsible for that.
They pushed that.
Yeah.
They pushed that. Folks, it's a wonderful organization. If you're Catholic, if you have Knights of Columbus in your parish, guys, join up. If you're a woman, there's the Columbiates for the women. So they're a great organization, great loyalty to the country. As a matter of fact, if you go to the assembly, that's the fourth degree, you're going to find a lot of patriotism being mentioned throughout the process of the meetings. So patriotism was a good thing too. But the patriotism and God, they were important parts of a civic education. And we'll have to deal with patriotism another time. But this whole concept of moving God out of the public square, we have to ask when and why did this happen? And I think the biggest movement, you mentioned it, was in 1962. God coming out of the public schools. God got thrown out of school. and it was a case called the Engel case, Supreme Court case, and say that and they said that it was a violation of the separation of church and state, the Establishment Clause, we call that. Now, folks, that was a very, very poor decision. And let me tell you why. Because the Establishment Clause doesn't mean that there's a freedom from religion. It says freedom of religion. Okay. Of religion means that you are free to practice your faith. Freedom of religion. And you are free to inform society of what your faith teaches you. So, if you are a person who belongs to, say, the Catholic Church. Let's just say the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is anti-abortion. Okay? You have every obligation to promote anti-abortion statements in school. You have a right to say that. Now, you dare not do that today in school. You'll probably be canceled for that. Something else has just recently come up in the state of Massachusetts. A young boy, 12 years old, his name is Liam Morrison, and Liam had the temerity to go to school wearing "There Are Only Two Genders" t-shirt.
Oh, yeah. Okay?
So he gets sent home. Now, the reason he gets sent home is because the school is, and in quotes, a welcoming community and very friendly to LGBTQ, all of that stuff, and that's okay to express that. But as soon as you express something that says, no, they're not 58 genders, they're only 2 genders, well, then you are causing a hostile environment, and he gets sent home.
Here's another one, and we didn't rehearse this. This is a real question.
This is for real, folks.
Muslim kids are allowed to pray in school because it's part of their religion. Mm-hmm. So the public schools have created a room that faces Mecca where they can go and pray. I'm always curious why Christians can't pray in school but Muslims can. And this is not a slam against Islam. I'm just asking that question.
I would suppose that many would say we have to provide a private place for them to pray in the school. That's what I think that they would say, that we need a place where their faith is not something that is being foisted upon other students. That's what I think the response would be. But it might not be a bad idea for some people to push that idea. You know, if a Muslim can pray 5 times a day and has a space at school, why can't Christians have a space too?
That's really my curiosity. Why not?
Yeah. Now, what we do have in schools is that after school hours, although God can't be allowed to speak in the classroom, they can have certain clubs and organizations that meet after school, and they could certainly have Christian values and Bible study and after school programs. So there are opportunities to get the word out. But after 62, the Engel case, the Bibles went out of the schools and prayer went out of the schools. And the whole idea of that was, this is freedom from religion. And you might have an atheist child or a parent that tells their kids, we don't believe in God, that is offended. I am offended by that. And they might catch the germ of belief. And I think that's where it stands.
That was the argument with Madeleine Murray O'Hair.
Correct,
right?
yeah.
That an atheist might actually get religion?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what's going on since 1962 regarding, what happens in our schools. Now, folks, BC had mentioned earlier, too, the Ten Commandments. And for the most part, I got to say, except for the first three. The first three have something to do with God. I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have strange gods before me. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, and thou shalt keep holy on the Sabbath. Okay? After that, everything else is kind of like, it's...
thou shalt not kill.
Yeah, I mean, this is not something that a rocket science has to figure out. Folks, it's not even, it's God's natural law. And I think that might be what people are offended at, that the natural law says there are certain things you shouldn't do. But nobody wants to be told they can't do something. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not bear false witness. I mean, these things are, part of a good human living, and they're good for society. And you can't have the Ten Commandments up in the school because they might remind you of God.
Or, remind you of doing the right thing.
Yeah. So we're in a mess.
We'll be back right after this. Hi, BC Cloutier here. We've got some exciting news for you. On October 19th, at the Naples Grand Beach Resort, Action for Life presents Jim Caviezel live and in person.
Why are you doing it? Because God's children are not for sale.
The star of Sound of Freedom will be here in Naples, telling us all about the filming of the movie and the real-life experiences of Special Agent Tim Ballard.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
Please join us for a lovely evening with dinner and beverages at the Naples Grand Beach Resort on Thursday, October 19th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. Get tickets at actionforlife.org/events. Welcome back to A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier. Father, before the break, and now after the break, we're talking about the removal of religion. I think one of the most ludicrous proposals that I've heard in a while is that we should remove the 4 words, "In God we trust," from our currency.
Yeah.
Again, I don't get it.
Yeah.
This is a fight not worth fighting, I think.
Well, for some people, it is a fight worth fighting because just the name of God they find to be offensive. One nation under God, in God we trust. It means that there are certain things, certain rules, certain regulations that we have to be aware of in order for us to live a good life. In God we trust. What does that mean? It means that our confidence is in God. It's something that tells us about, I think, our nation itself, that we trust that God has a special interest in America, and that America is a special place. And we are, folks, we are a special place. God has blessed us in so many ways. And we trust in God, but it also reminds us that, on a currency, and this is just my thinking about this, in God we trust, that we have to have a society that's built on trust. And currency is one of the ways that, we experience trust in human beings. I want something that you have, and you're willing to sell it to me, and we have a trust between each other that I'm going to provide you with the cash that's necessary to carry on a certain transaction.
And trust in the cash itself. It's just paper.
Yeah.
But we trust.
We trust. We have to trust the government that they're... What is backing up the money today?
Well,
there used to be gold, the gold standard that we used to have.
Father, don't go there.
Folks, I'm sorry, this is above my pay grade. But that's where the trust was. In God we trust, in that, we could trust the government, that we can trust our neighbor, that there was going to be a fair payment for services rendered or for any object that I purchased. And that trust, because you can't have a good society without trust. That's what makes capitalism so good. And America so good, is that we are built on trust. Once that trust is broken, everything collapses. The economy collapses. Our trust in each other collapses.
Right, and we see that in third world countries when there's no trust in the currency, that the entire financial structure falls apart.
Yeah.
But the curious thing for those who are offended by God is, the nation was founded by God-fearing men,
right.
and they refer to God quite often in all of their writings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pretty much all of our founding fathers had some faith in God.
Yeah, they would mention, like, for instance, divine providence.
Right.
Yeah, that was a big thing. As I said, they weren't all devout Christians. But they did believe in the Bible. Some didn't believe in the miracles of the Bible, but they believed in the Bible. They believed in there was a divine providence that had to be recognized and obeyed, and they believed that divine providence was working in a special way in America.
And it did for a couple of 100 years, and then it began to erode. And it continues to erode.
Yeah, well,
that's very troubling.
Yeah, and you can see it in the morality.
Yeah.
In the morality in our country, because there's certainly a tremendous breakdown in morality, where people are not obeying laws, not just civil laws, but obeying also God-given laws regarding human sexuality. There's no limit. So why do you want to get rid of God? Well, because without God, I can do whatever I want.
Look at abortion.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of abortion is for no good reason other than I want to get rid of this baby.
Right.
And it is a baby.
Right.
And somehow people, when they stop believing in God, stop believing that the heartbeat that they hear is a human being.
Right. Well, look at BC, even the marriage laws. It was always that there were men and women. Two genders, and that when you marry someone of the opposite gender. Okay, so all of a sudden, without God, God made them male and female. What do you have now? You have people that are saying, well, you could have two men, you could have two women, and some are going so far as to call it polyamorous, meaning more than two people involved in some kind of a sexual relationship. So, without God, without this divine providence, a lot of the foundations for our country, the nuclear family, is destroyed. Mother, father, children. That's the basic building block of our society. Without God, it kind of leaves the door open sometimes for lack of trust and dishonesty. If I'm not worried that there is a God watching over me that has put certain demands upon me, that currency, in God we trust. I wonder how many people pay attention to that. In God we trust, because God is the motivating power that helps create a free society. If you go to a communist country, I'm sure that they're not going to have "In God we trust" on the currency.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to have whoever's in power then on the currency.
The picture of
right?
Kim Jong-un.
And he'll tell you, we don't need no God because you got me.
Right, and if you dare go into that country with the Bible, well,
Oof.
you're toast. Sorry, folks. I wouldn't go there on vacation.
I think not.
I don't know if you're allowed in.
We'll be back right after this. Hi, BC Cloutier here. We've got some exciting news for you. On October 19th, at the Naples Grand Beach Resort, Action for Life presents Jim Caviezel live and in person.
Why are you doing it? Because God's children are not for sale.
The star of Sound of Freedom will be here in Naples telling us all about the filming of the movie and the real-life experiences of Special Agent Tim Ballard.
Hear that? That's the sound of freedom.
Please join us for a lovely evening with dinner and beverages at the Naples Grand Beach Resort on Thursday, October 19th, beginning at 5:30 p.m. Get tickets at actionforlife.org/events.
Hey gang, I know a lot of you sometimes can't watch all of our episodes of Action for Life. However, we have a solution for that. All you have to do is go to YouTube and search for Action for Life Florida. And you can catch up on all the shows, and guess what? Extra added bonus, you get to hear my weekly homily. So, YouTube and you make a fine couple.
Action for Life is proud to sponsor A Conversation with Father Orsi. Action for Life is an all-volunteer, pro-life interfaith ministry that's focused on the sanctity of life from conception to natural death. In addition to sponsoring this TV program, Action for Life provides financial support and life assistance to any woman who wishes to carry her baby to term in anticipation of an adoption. Action for Life also provides financial assistance to a variety of pro-life organizations, including maternity homes, pregnancy resource centers, anti-human trafficking agencies, and sidewalk advocates, but to name a few. Please consider making a donation so that we can continue in the fight to save preborn babies. You can donate online at actionforlife.org. Thank you and God bless. And we're back with A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm B.C. Cloutier. This is Father Michael Orsi. Father, it's time for a little scripture.
All right.
Let me quote from the
You're
book
taking my job, huh?
No, not at all. Just announcing.
Okay.
From the book of Deuteronomy. The Lord will send upon you disaster, panic, and frustration in everything you attempt to do until you are destroyed and perish quickly on account of the evil of your deeds, because you have forsaken me. Boy, when I read that passage, many of us have certainly forsaken God.
Yes.
And it seems to me that the bill is coming due.
Yeah. I think we have to go no further than to look in the major cities of our country. They are living in chaos. They have high crime rates. They have people who are living on the streets. Mm-hmm. They have people who are on drugs. They have people who are dying all the time of fentanyl. People are dying of fentanyl all over this country, but we'll talk about that maybe later.
Maybe young, or mostly young people.
Yeah. So what is missing from these major cities, and what's missing, in our country? And I believe it is that God is not present in the minds of the people, and maybe the churches too have somehow let people down. A lot of churches have gotten into the social gospel. And social gospel is not something that's new. It was very prevalent in the 1920s, social gospel is to get involved in the social issues, get involved in cleaning up the slums, taking care of the hungry, taking care of the homeless. And they're all wonderful things. But if there is not a sense of God along with that, these become nothing but other programs that are government programs. And sometimes churches themselves say, well, we want to do some good things. And it's great. They are good things, getting the homeless off the streets and feeding the people who are hungry and getting people off drugs. They're wonderful things. And sometimes, churches take government money and then begin to become simply agents of the government themselves. And unless the churches go into these troubled areas and begin to preach the gospel to these people while they're taking care of their human needs, there's not going to be any great change. It just becomes more government, and government simply using the churches. We call them faith-based organizations.
Right.
People thought it was just so wonderful. George W. Was talking about faith-based organizations. It sounded really good. Hey, we're going to get a lot of government money, and the government's going to use our churches. Well, what happened was, the government did use our churches. And then all of a sudden, the government says, well, you can't have a crucifix up. You can't have a Bible. You can't have prayer meetings. You can't pray before meals. And all of a sudden, what do we have? We just simply have an extension of government, and God is left out of the picture again. And when God's left out of the picture, I don't care, how good your programs are, how your social services are in your area. It's not going to work. It's not going to change at all.
It's interesting with AA, arguably the most successful recovery program ever designed. I realize they don't use the word God, but they very much focus on a higher power. Yeah. Even there, they say to these people who are addicted to alcohol and I guess drugs, also with Narcotics Anonymous, there is a higher power, and you have to address your issues with your higher power. I don't get why everybody doesn't understand that.
Yeah. Certainly, it's not just the major cities in our country. It's most prevalent there, where we see all the chaos. But it's all over the country, and I believe it's our government. It's our government itself, BC, that is not really reflecting on God in the decisions that we are making.
I would argue that they are doing everything possible to ignore God.
Yeah.
I look at the Biden administration's position on abortion. They've gone way beyond what's reasonable even to pro-choice people.
Right. And yet he calls himself a devout Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that that's legitimate. I don't think I know that's not legitimate. But we do have a society now where, God is taken out of the equation, and a religion becomes something, if there is any religion at all, okay? Because the number of people who consider themselves to be church-going believers has declined.
Father, thank you for another great talk. Join us again next week for another episode of A Conversation with Father Orsi. Thank you for being with us, and until next week, God bless.